As we approach 50 years since the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the topics of race and justice in America are more relevant now than ever. The latest issue of The Atlantic commemorates Dr. King's life and legacy. It covers his work from a young activist to the building of his campaign for equality. And it features speeches and essays by King that are juxtaposed by original essays about similar issues in America today. It covers pop culture, education, incarceration, activism, and much more.
Vann Newkirk is a staff writer at The Atlantic and was one of the key collaborators of this special issue and joins us now. Thanks a lot for joining us, Vann. When I heard about The Atlantic doing this, I thought, you know, here's a subject and a subject matter that has been covered over and over and over again. And The Atlantic is sort of known for its thought-provoking essays. So it's quite a bar that you have to sort of rise to make it an Atlantic-worthy special edition. What makes this different than other publications like this that focused on Martin Luther King Jr. and his words?
Well, the first thing that makes it different to me is the fact that we are including several original speeches, essays, and works from Dr. King himself. So although lots of what we do there is interpretive, we have original essays, we include other archival content, the biggest draw for me is going and seeing the actual text of casualties of the war in Vietnam from King himself. We also take, I believe, a novel approach to analyzing what his impact, his legacy has been on the country in the last 50 years. We look at the world through his own three major evils of racism, poverty, and militarism. And that's something I think that adds value to our conversation and gives us a truer vision and image of what he was, what he did, and what made him.
And Vann, we see a lot of work written by Dr. King himself, which gives us a very unique and interesting perspective. One of which, a letter written while he was incarcerated, and became kind of a staple for the civil rights movement. How does that then, for the reader and for all of us who are learning about it, really give us a new look into Dr. King's life?
So yeah, that was Letter from Birmingham Jail, originally published actually in The Atlantic in 1963 as The Negro Is Your Brother. And that was, I think, it's a really powerful look at King's frustrations, at what really drove him and what he thought about people who said the civil rights movement was going too fast and too far. And so it's King at what I believe to be his most radical. He's saying the white moderate is the actual biggest impediment to progress as opposed to the Klansman. And he's really taking, I believe, the establishment to task, which is something lots of people in the establishment now like to quote him and take him out of context. But it really sort of makes you think about whether King would be sort of pushing you today or whether he would be an acceptance of what's happening.
Your colleague, Jeffrey Goldberg, wrote a little bit of an essay kind of previewing what to expect. And what I found interesting about that essay is it highlights some of the writings in The Atlantic over years where the same themes come up over and over again. W.E.B. Du Bois talking about the problem of the 20th century is the color line. Well, now we're in the 21st century, and it seems like we haven't moved far from that at all. The article is divided into what King called his three evils: racism, poverty, and militarism. The essays seem like they could be written today in many ways.
Yes. Well, The Atlantic, we were founded as an abolitionist magazine. So I believe the tradition from Frederick Douglass to W.E.B. Du Bois to King himself and then on, we have always written in that tradition of thinking about what makes us a more perfect union, especially in the terms of a racial context. So a lot of these essays King's writing, he's writing about militarism, which I think it's something that could be applied today. He's writing the precursor to modern text about mass incarceration. He's talking about white backlash, which is a term that was used so often in 2017, one he popularized. So, and then we do have modern essays from people who are looking back. And the most striking thing when they are juxtaposed with his own works is, like you said, just how similar many of the goings-on, the happenings, and the analyses are to what they were in 1968, 67, and before.
Vann, you personally interviewed Representative John Lewis for this issue. Of course, Representative Lewis marched with Dr. King in Selma. What did you guys talk about? What was your conversation like with him?
So what I wanted to talk about first with Congressman Lewis was just what it was like knowing King, what it was like to be brought under the wing of a man who was already then legendary in Alabama and the South after leading the boycotts. And what he told me, he was saying he was called the boy from Troy. It was like meeting one of his real life heroes, and he'd read about King first from comic books, and so it's like meeting a comic book hero. But then we got into how Lewis himself was made into a paragon of the civil rights movement through that involvement of King, how he was brought on, how he had his own life as an activist through the sit-ins in Nashville. And then we talked about, fast forwarding to today, what he fears, what might be happening in the country today that he thought he defeated, that King thought he had defeated by '68, and how the 50 years have changed and how they haven't.
You worked with the King family. The King family is very protective of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. What was it that they were hoping that readers would get out of this edition?
Yeah, so we worked closely with Dr. Bernice King, the King Center, and the King Estate on this. And what was vital, because we were, again, doing something ambitious with taking King's actual speeches and putting them into the magazine. So what was vital to them was that we basically portray King in a light that was fair and holistic. So we took the framework of the three evils, which was something they promote and endorse too, and we said, okay, this is how we're going to use our lens. This is what we're going to show through King's work. And I believe there was great synergy between us and the King family and estate in taking the impetus of this 50-year anniversary to look back, to give people a vision of King that they probably have not seen before, but that I believe is closest to his real life and to what his children remember him to be.
And aside from perhaps a new understanding of Dr. King, what do you hope readers walk away with?
So I hope that every reader that takes this magazine, this King special issue of The Atlantic, and reads it, whether they read it from cover to cover, whether they just read one story, I hope they walk away challenged, thinking about what they believe to know about the civil rights movement, about Dr. King himself, about what he stood for, and about what this country's racial legacy is. Each piece, I believe, challenges every individual to think about just how far we've come and how far we have to go. We use Benjamin Elijah Mays' eulogy as sort of the kicking off point, and how he ends that eulogy is saying, we have so much work left to do, and that's in 1968. So I really want every reader to look and see how much work we still have left to do 50 years later.
Vann Newkirk, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you can find the special issue of The Atlantic on newsstands or on their website.